My name is Rick Smolan. I'm the co-author of The Good Fight, America's Ongoing Struggle for Justice, and you're watching Mr. Media.
I'm Bob Andelman, and this is a Mr. Media interview. You can see, hear, and read more than 1,000 of my previous celebrity interviews at mrmedia.com. That's mrmedia.com. Subscribe to the show on YouTube, Apple Podcast, iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Alexa Podcast, or Stitcher, and follow me on Twitter or Facebook. And if you like the show, and please like the show, tell the world with a 5-star review on iTunes or Apple Podcasts. On today's show, I'll talk to former National Geographic magazine photographer turned film producer and curator Rick Smolan. He's the co-author with Jennifer Irwit of The Good Fight, America's Ongoing Struggle for Justice. This is Rick's third appearance on Mr. Media. He was last here to discuss the release of the movie Tracks, a true story inspired by one of his professional adventures in the Australian outback. By the way, Adam Driver played Rick in the film. Stick around. Fighting the good fight is an American tradition. Some people believe it is the essence of being American, standing up for what you believe is right, protecting those unable to fight for themselves, and defending the essence of American idealism, even when doing so flies in the face of the American political establishment. And since January 20th, 2017, it seems that many of us are fighting the good fight over issues we thought had already been legislated and settled. Democracy, it seems, is a more fragile concept than many of us born since 1945 thought. My guest today, Rick Smolan, is the co-author of a new coffee table book of searing photography and no equivocating essays called The Good Fight, America's Ongoing Struggle for Justice. It depicts the injustices and victories over injustices experienced by African Americans, Native Americans, Jews, Muslims, women, people in the LGBTQ community, Latino Americans, Asian Americans, and the disabled. Now, I don't know about your American community, but that seems to cover pretty much everybody that I know. Of course, the people who don't think that those groups are equal to them in some way have been coming out from under rocks in the past year. They remind us that the good fight is never won. We must be ever vigilant. Now, this is Rick's third visit to Mr. Media. He always brings projects that are visually arresting, provocative, and really different from what came before. So there's never a dull moment. Rick Smolan, welcome back to Mr. Media.
Bob, nice to be here. Thanks for having me on your show again.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure. I know I don't have to worry about carrying the conversation. Is it too much to dream of having a day off from the good fight? I swear that these days, one day rolls into a week, into a month, and I don't know. Are you as exhausted by it as I am?
Have you ever driven late at night with a friend and they're in the driver's seat and you're the passenger and they say, you know what, just close your eyes, go to sleep, and I'll wake you up when we get there. But you have this nagging suspicion that if you don't stay awake, they're going to crash, even though there's nothing you can do to change their driving. But that's how I felt the last year. Part of me just wants to close my eyes and not look anymore. And then part of me thinks if I don't stay alert, if I don't keep paying attention, that even though I don't feel like there's really anything I can do about what's happening in America right now, I just want to keep my eyes open, even though it's exhausting, as you said. And I think in some ways that was the motivation for doing this book. I mean, some people protest, some people run for office. My way of trying to handle and understand and maybe wake other people up to what I've been seeing is to look backwards over the last 100 years with the help of some incredibly talented photographers to look at the astounding progress, and some of it's so recent, that towards sort of the ideals of what I think a lot of us were brought up believing what America stood for, and reminding people what's at stake right now, what our president and his minions are trying to dismantle, literally second by second. So the book is not partisan. The opening essay in the book is written by Bret Stephens, who's a neoconservative writer at the New York Times. But I think the general feeling of the book, through the eyes of photographers and essays, is we need to really wake up and pay attention, because this the America that I think we've all thought was moving in the right direction now seems to be moving backwards.
Well, I'm glad you pointed out that it's nonpartisan, because I wanted to make a point, especially after the introduction, that I just gave you, that these people, a lot of people don't appreciate or understand that books like this, you didn't decide last week, hey, let's put on a book. They take a year, 2 years, maybe more to come together. So I wanted to ask you to explain what the genesis of the book was, when it started, and actually when you kind of capped the contributions and set the content, because I suspect Trump probably hadn't been president very long. It's just been kind of more coincidental, the focus, I guess.
Well, I mean, it's a good question. I am fortunate to go to this annual TED conference every year, where I've been very fortunate to be a speaker for a few times, but mostly I go just to have my brain tickled and stimulated and inspired by some very smart people that get on stage and tell us about a potential future. And it's a pretty optimistic group of people. So 2 years ago, I was sitting at dinner, the gentleman next to me, and we sort of introduced ourselves. His name was Jonathan Greenblatt. And I had met him previously when he was working for Starbucks. He'd actually created, when you go into Starbucks and they have that ethos water, every $1 of every thing that you buy goes to feed, to provide fresh water to people in the developing world. And then I found out that he'd gone to work for President Obama, and he'd just taken over at the head of the Anti-Defamation League. And, I said, so you guys fight for the rights of Jewish people? He said, no, actually, we fight for the rights of Latinos and Muslims. I said, seriously, the Anti-Defamation League fights for the Muslim community? He said, yeah, we fight for the gay community, for women, for African Americans. He said, we basically, our whole premise is to look for people that are not being treated fairly in America and help support them. So he said, since you asked me about the Anti-Defamation League, has anybody ever done a book looking at all the different struggles and the parallels and what people have learned from each other of how to fight and how each group has fought to be treated fairly and have the laws applied to them the same way. And I said, I don't know if there's been a book like that. I've never seen it. So anyway, this conversation led to this new book, The Good Fight. And, somebody asked me the other day, how do you start? I mean, every one of the groups that we're focusing on in this book, and I'll show you the book here. It's quite striking. It's a big coffee table book, weighs 5 pounds. Little Post-its are the notes.
And folks, every copy of the book comes with little Post-it notes that Rick personally has torn and stuck in the pages.
Exactly. Someone always says, like, what are your favorite pictures? And it's like, well, which are your favorite kids? That's one of them. We looked back over the last 100 years. The book started actually as a retrospective. And then when Trump was elected, it seemed like so many of the issues in this book that we thought we were talking about history suddenly all bubbled back to the surface, whether it's immigration or the mistreatment of African Americans by police or, women, this whole Me Too movement. There was just so many issues suddenly that are, back in play again. So we decided we were actually going to come out with a book a year ago. And we decided we needed to wait a year and actually incorporate Trump's first year into the book to see if he changed his ways or if he was the same person that we saw running for office. And unfortunately, it's much worse than any of us even imagined. I think in my worst nightmares, it's so much worse than I think any of us expected. Again, that's not what the book is about. It's not about Trump. It's about the fights that so many people have fought in America, and it's a little hard to explain without actually sharing some of the pictures. I mean, when I started working on the book, one of my big worries is that it would be depressing. Mm-hmm. I was worried looking back at some of the dark chapters in America's past where people were treated incredibly badly, where there were lynchings and there were hangings and mass murders of different ethnic groups, that nobody would want to look at a book like that. And what I discovered was that while those pictures and some of those stories are in the book, if you ask somebody who is Muslim, Jewish, Black, gay, a woman, Latino, handicapped, Asian American, would you rather be in 1917 or 2017? And when you ask the question that way, everybody says immediately, well, obviously today. Mm-hmm. And that's not in any way to indicate things are all hunky-dory and everything's not fixed. There's a lot of progress we still need to make, but it's just shocking to see how bad things were 100 years ago for so many groups that are now pretty much integrated, for the most part, into American society. And that's one of the things we try to incorporate in the book.
Well, one of the things I think it's struck me anyway in going through the book is that you get the sense that if these groups that are all affected in the book that we've listed off, each of us now, if they pooled their resources and their fight, which I think is what white supremacists are really afraid of, is that if all these people who've been oppressed separately start pooling their influence and their resources, there likely won't be much stopping them. And I think one of the best examples of that, you have, I'm going to send you scurrying here, but you have a photo in there from just about a year ago when the first big stupid thing that the Trump administration did was the immigration. And there was this rush to airports to welcome people. And and you had Jews and Muslims, a very unlikely group, coming together and finding, oh my God, hey, we have something in common. We can agree on this. We can work together on this. And if that's the kind of thing where the whole equation changes when something like that happens.
Right. So, I mean, I think what's remarkable about this photograph, and I'm trying to fit myself into the frame here, is that you've got, on the left, you've got a Muslim American with his daughter on his shoulders, and on the right, you've got a Jewish American with his son on his shoulders, working together, fighting together. And, Bob, one of the things, my hope, and maybe this is a little Pollyanna-ish of me, I'm a glass half full person. My hope is that what has happened with Trump and what's happened, very much a lot of the Republican Party is a wake-up call. That it's like the sand on the oyster that creates the pearl. I think the fact that you have millennial women and grandmothers marching together in the largest protest in American history for something that, as you said at the opening, a lot of us thought a lot of these battles were, if not resolved, at least moving in the right direction. You've got Muslims and Jews working together. You've got the Anti-Defamation League coming to the aid of the gay community and fighting very hard for them to marry whoever they want and love whoever they want. So I think there's a wonderful expression called woke that sort of emerged out of the Black Lives Matter movement. I was at All Things Digital, the conference or now Recode, run by Walt Mossberg and Kara Swisher, about 2 years ago. And Jack Dorsey, who started Twitter and now also runs Square, was there. And he brought a gentleman named DeRay McKesson, who was one of the people that helped start the Black Lives Matter movement. And they gave everybody in the audience T-shirts. And these are like, the CEOs of, Fortune 500, big technology companies. And this idea of the word woke is that, I think a lot of us have been worrying about ourselves, about our careers, about our relationships, and not really worrying about, I've never been a political person my whole life. I always thought my vote doesn't matter. What's one vote going to make a difference one way or another? And those politicians, I'm going to leave all the problems up to them. That, the word politics, you mentioned it to me and my eyes would glaze over. And now I wake up every morning and I'm glued to my phone and to the TV and my, the podcasts I listen to, because I feel like everything that I thought stands for America seems to be under threat right now. And again, that's one of the things we wanted to show in the book. And, as you just said, this picture of Muslims and Jews working together to fight against something that they feel is incredibly unjust is remarkable. I might even share another picture, which is a similar idea with your audience here. So here's an interesting picture. This was a picture a lot of people saw. It was the march the day after Trump was inaugurated. Again, some of the largest, marches in American history. And what I like about the picture is that there's a little call out, if you see on the top right there. I don't know if you can see that. But last year, in 2016, 800 women in America said they're going to run for office. And at the time that we published our book, which is about 3 months ago, 11,000 women declared they're going to run for office. Last week, Time magazine, and on the cover, said that 22,000 women are now running for office. So a lot of people are waking up saying, oh my God, I can't just hope that some, superwoman or superman or some politician's going to swoop in and save the day. I think a lot of people are now feeling like they need to get involved personally, that they can't just sit back and hope that somebody else solves the problems. And if Trump's legacy is simply that he woke everybody up to what's important and what we stand for as a nation, then I think maybe he's actually accomplished something. But so far, that's the only positive thing that I could eke out of this president so far.
I'm with you there. I'll also tell people that the great thing about that photo, and that I don't even have to look at it to tell you, it's so crystal clear. You can read some of the women's signs in the march, and some of them are just so flippin' funny.
Yeah,
I mean, keep your tiny hands off my, off my uterus.
Well, here's another one. This is actually my picture. My daughter Phoebe and I were supposed to go to the march in Washington, but she bailed on me at the last minute, so we did the march in New York.
Okay.
And that, as a result, this is the opening picture in the women's chapter. I love that.
Rick, if you can hold that back up and hold it right there, that's good. Right? No, over to the side a little bit. We want to get it to the middle, right in front of the camera. Over the other way. Yeah. Now, move it right in front of your face. That page. Okay. Well, I'll just read it to people. It says, "Hell hath no fury like 157 million women scorned." Yeah. It's great. I wanted to point out, I was thinking before, you were talking about how, some people run for office and some people get involved in campaigns. Your thing has been to do this through print and through media. Like yourself, I have never been a terribly political guy. I mean, just... And maybe the last 2 years more so than ever before. The thing that I've come upon the last year that I've been doing, and really in the last 6 months, is I've been encouraging people to do 1+1. Is like support a local candidate and then support a candidate who's not local to you, but who's in an important race.
Good idea.
You feel is important to win. And then I've added one other thing to that is, a lot of these campaigns can be won by small contributions. Mm-hmm. And so if you see more than one race outside of your area that you want to help, but you don't have a lot of money, you can send them $5 a week or $5 a month. Mm-hmm. And it ends when the campaign ends. But that way you could send to maybe 4 or 5 candidates that you want to help. And if you and your friends, your neighbors do that for the candidates that you believe in, you can have a bigger impact on more than just what happens in your neighborhood, which of course is still very important.
It's a great idea. I think Bernie Sanders did all of his campaigning or fundraising from small donations, from what I recall. Yeah,
exactly. Now, in the book, it's a combination of two things. There are these great photos that you've just shown some examples of, and then there are these terrific essays. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about who some of your writers of the essays are. I know George Takei is right there at the top of the list of people who are familiar. But how did you select them, and why these particular people?
Well, we're looking for a very strong voice, somebody, and a very personal story. I didn't want sort of an encyclopedic story. I also wanted to be short and to the point, so it's 2,000 or 3,000 words. It's not like a 30 or 40 page essay, for example. Mm-hmm. George from Star Trek is obviously, I didn't know that he'd grown up in a Japanese internment camp. I had
California,
no idea.
Right?
Incredible, yeah. And his family lost their farm. Sorry, my phone keeps making noise here. There's a wonderful essay by Tiffany Shlain, who started the Webby Awards. She lives in San Francisco. Todd Brewster was a wonderful New York Times bestselling author, was Peter Jennings' partner on the Century book. He was both our mentor, came up with the title of the book, wrote the wonderful introduction essay to the book itself. Ray Suarez, who many of your people in your audience might recall from Talk of the Nation, is a great NPR and PBS correspondent. He wrote about the Latino American experience. So Cleve Jones, who started the AIDS Quilt and was Harvey Milk's assistant when he was murdered in San Francisco. Really powerful voices. Amy Mullins is a double amputee who's the mother now in Stranger Things. Oh. A wonderful, inspiring woman who gave one of the best TED Talks ever. So we've got these wonderful voices that sort of talk about their own personal journey. One of the things that really, you mentioned before, what if all these groups got together and collaborated? One of the things that, I mean, for me, doing the Good Fight book was like going to a history school. I mean, I knew little bits and pieces of this. I didn't know, for example, that I thought that lynchings were done in the middle of the night with people with hoods over their heads to hide themselves. I didn't know that these were like carnivals and like public, fairs where people would show up, they would lynch somebody, they'd make up a reason why they were lynching him. In many cases, they were just people accused of they would grab a black person and hang them, and people would pose proudly in front of the corpse hanging from the tree. I met a guy that had found postcards, and the U.S. government made it illegal to mail the postcards, but the lynching in 1912, but the lynchings went on until 1948. Yeah. Astounding pieces of history that I had no idea had ever happened. In fact, there's one of the people that wrote in the book is Brian Stevenson, who created the Equal Justice Initiative, and he's creating a lynching museum now in the South. And again, the point of this is for us to learn from our mistakes, to not bury the past, to say, every country's got a dark history, and America's no different. And the point is, look how much, hopefully, we've progressed from that. But if you don't acknowledge the past, if you don't acknowledge what you've done wrong, you don't learn from it. You just keep repeating the mistakes. So when people say, well, why would you want to bring that up? Why do you want to remind people of it? It's sort of like Holocaust deniers. Like the point of it is to say, as a species, let's make sure that we don't ever do anything like that again. That's something that animals do. It's not something that human beings do. So we, in the book, we've got this mixture of a pretty dark past with a pretty, positive future. I'll show you one other picture, which I really love. This is at the Dakota Pike.
These are the veterans, aren't they?
Yeah. What's amazing is 300 different groups of Native Americans came together, in addition to U.S. veterans, to protest what was happening at the Dakota Pipeline. And, the fact that, again, that by protesting, you brought together all these different groups of Native Americans, the largest gathering in American history, it was pretty remarkable.
Stirred the hornet's nest, I think, is the expression.
Yeah.
It's an interesting time when the Nazis and the Klansmen and the white supremacists feel emboldened, thank you, to be out in public and be photographed without their hoods and without hiding behind, anonymous things on the internet. But at the same time, all these other groups have been equally emboldened, if not more so, to come out and join together and stand up. We have the second Women's March and all these other things that are going on, and I suspect there will be more of the same type of thing. You, of course, with your background as a photographer, I imagine choosing photos for a book like this, it's kind of your own Sophie's choice, as you kind of mentioned, right? It's kind of hard to decide. It's got to be hard to decide what to put in and what to leave out.
Well, it's sort of which of your children make it into the lifeboat. That's how it feels. And we looked at hundreds of thousands of pictures. Some of the pictures in the book are the all-time classics, the ones that we've all seen throughout the history of the civil rights, movements. But others are ones we found in people's basements, in museums where there was a faded print. We went back and found the original of a picture of the Statue of Liberty being built.
That's a great picture. Over in France, you have the torch inside the building.
Let's see if I can find that quickly. It's a really remarkable picture. So this is a picture. We actually let's see if I can. Right there.
That's good. Yep.
And it's an amazing photograph. So this is being built in France. A lot of people, myself included, didn't know that this picture, the hand of the statue.
Rick, if you can bring it a little to your right.
Okay, to my right.
Yeah, and a little back a little bit to your left.
Okay.
That's good. Okay,
good.
Now I think people should be able to see it now. That's good.
Okay, so the torch in the hand actually came over a year before the rest of the statue. It was actually in Madison Square Park in New York, and I love when you actually look at the picture. You can see little people in it. They're like little Geppetto's workshop.
It looks I thought it looked like almost like an illustration until you focus on these real people. Yeah. Yeah,
it's amazing. And we had to go in Photoshop and sort of, it was so faded and there was so much dirt and scratches on it, but we were able to restore it to the way it looked originally. And there's only one print of this in existence. We found it in France in a family's collection. So a lot of putting this book together was a little bit like doing a jigsaw puzzle and you lost the box the pieces came in. So you don't know what it's supposed to look like. You keep trying things. We had an incredible team working on the book. for probably a good part of about 9 months, actually, designing the book. There's a gentleman named David Griffin who actually designed the book, and I drove him crazy because we literally tore it apart like 27 times and put it back together, trying to figure out what's the right order, which pictures should go with which, what size should they be, integrating them into the text. And then the other thing that's really fun, and probably the techies in your audience would like this, is there's a little on the back of the book. It explains there's a little icon that appears throughout the book. I'll see if I can find an example of it. Like right here, for example, on the bottom right, there's a little red dot. And when you point your phone at this picture, for example, this is Billie Holiday singing
Strange Fruit.
I'll see if I can hold up three hands at once here and see if I can make this work. But there's an app. It's called the Good Fight Viewer app.
Okay.
And I'll see if I can make this work. But you point your phone at the picture, a little icon shows up saying the Good Fight. And then a minute later, and I guess I turned the volume off on this. So let me turn the volume on. I don't know if you can see that or not. Of course, I turned it off. The thing that's kind of weird now about the 10, let's see, can we make it play? And there we go.
Oh, cool.
So that's Billie Holiday singing it. So it's really amazing. There's 63 pictures in the book that when you point your phone immediately, just like that, even in a low light, even with reflections, and there's TED Talks, there's little movie clips. In every chapter in the book, we have one song that represented the struggle from that group. We have Woody Guthrie's Deportee in the Latino American section. We have God Bless America in the Jewish section. We have Strange Fruit in the African American section. So we're showing photographs, music, videos, wonderful essays, incredible captions. And the nice thing, Bob, about a photography book is that you don't need to read it from beginning to end. You can. That's how we designed it. But you can open it anywhere. And a lot of the pictures. The thing that I'm so happy about with this book, in addition to the fact that it was just featured in the New York Times and everybody at TED was just sent, all 1,500 people at TED just got a copy of the book, is that over and over again, all the reviews on Amazon and all the feedback we've gotten is that the book actually gives you a sense of optimism and hope. Mm-hmm. It's actually an upbeat book, oddly enough, given the topic, that when people finish or just look through the book, we start every chapter with something inspiring. Then we take you back into the sort of the dark past or some of the challenges and struggles that each group have experienced. And then we bring you back up at the end and talk about what's happening today.
Well, I wanted to ask you about something, and this is a little awkward to say it this way, so excuse me, but you do a book like this, it's a phenomenal amount of work. I'm sure the budget is very expensive to bring all these elements together, all the people that worked on it, and then you produce it, and it has to have a price tag on it that puts it out of range of people who you'd really like to have access to it. And I wonder, is that because a lot of people you'd want to see it are the people who aren't going to spend. I actually don't know in front of me the price tag on the book. But is there some way, maybe through digital or something, to get this book in front of high school students?
That's my dream. I want every high school student, every high school library in America to have a copy of the book. But your question is great because this book should cost $70. It's a $70 book. Mm-hmm. It's priced at $35. Amazon's selling it for $23, including Prime delivery, which is amazing. $23 for this is extraordinary. We purposely, all the profits from the book go to the Anti-Defamation, but we purposely reduced the profits in general just to make the book incredibly affordable for average people. So $23 for a book that weighs 5 pounds. And this thing, literally, I carry these around all day. This is a heavy book, I'll tell you.
Oh, it is. I've got my copy right here. And yeah, that's what made me think about it. I thought, it'd be great if maybe, if there were some corporations or nonprofits that could sponsor even digital delivery to.
So this is a picture you mentioned before. Which
I love that picture.
In the book. It's really extraordinary picture.
Yeah.
This has become, the picture in Tiananmen Square?
This is very much like that, yeah.
The guy stopping the tank. It's one of those pictures that has become now iconic of the whole Black Lives Matter movement. And just the elegance of that young woman standing up to the police is really remarkable.
Yeah. No, it's a phenomenal book. I wanted to ask you before we go. I mean, we all have to kind of pick our battles these days, don't we? I mean, fighting every fight is kind of a recipe for losing them all.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to people? How would you help them keep their head in the game and stay in the good fight?
Well, less than half of America voted in the last election, so we kind of have ourselves to blame for some of this. So my hope is that a lot more people that the next election, the midterms and the 2020 election, may, I hope, turn out to be the largest voter participation in U.S. history, because I think people are very freaked out of what's happening. And
there's certainly been more Russians voting this term than any time before.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that scares me the most right now, if you said if there's one thing out there that's frightened you the most, is that the way a lot of the politicians are acting right now on the right are as if they don't care about being reelected. There's so many things that they're doing that, why would you vote for people that actually makes it okay to pollute the air and pollute the water? Why would you want to arrest people for having a joint in their car with a cost not only to that person and their family, but for what purpose? I mean, this is ridiculous at this point. We have an opioid crisis, but we're gonna lock people up for smoking a joint. Makes no sense at all. So the thing that frightens me is that there are so many things that they're doing that you think, who's going to vote for a person that does that? And when you hear that 53% of Americans, Republicans, would be okay if the elections were postponed for some reason. It used to be that when you fought and you lost, you were a good sport. It's like, the other side won. You were at a baseball game or a football game, and you just accepted that you won or lost. But there's this sense now that, even Trump's saying that if he had lost, he wasn't going to just accept it. There's a very weird sense of what's going on in our political world right now, where I'm scared that somehow there's going to be martial law and there won't be an election for whatever trumped up reason, all puns intended.
Oh, Roy Moore still hasn't conceded to Doug Jones in the Alabama Senate race.
That's what I mean. It's like if they lose, they're going to come up with some excuse. I was reading yesterday where it was in Ohio that the politicians are trying to impeach the Ohio Supreme Court.
Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Pennsylvania. It's like it just feels like things are breaking down, and I'm hoping. I'm not saying that everybody on the left is good and decent and honest, but I think that most people on the left at least have their heart in the right place, and I think they think if all of society is better, then we all better from that, as opposed to it all being about personal gain. I don't think this is all about having lower taxes and that's the end of the story. Listen, I benefit from some of the things that the Republicans have done, but I'd rather pay higher taxes and live in a happier, more just society where I don't have people that are poor that they've got to do something to find money, a way of supporting their family.
That's the way we feel about it. Absolutely. Well, listen, folks, you can find The Good Fight, America's ongoing struggle. One more time. There you go. It's The Good Fight, America's ongoing struggle for justice, by my guest Rick Smolan and his co-author Jennifer Irwit. It's in great bookstores everywhere, or you can order it right now at a great price at MrMedia.com. That's MRmedia.com. If you are watching on the Mr. Media site, below the video, you will see the cover of the book. You can click on it right now, have it delivered to you maybe by drone in 30 minutes to an hour, or certainly within the next 24 hours. Generally, Amazon can get it to you. It's a great book. It really is incredibly reasonably priced. You should have it. Rick, is there a website for the book or that you want to send people to for more information?
No, I would just send them to Amazon or to Barnes & Noble. I think that's the best way. We have a Facebook page also, The Good Fight Book, that we can learn more and you can see a lot of the publicity. There's a great story with Fast Company yesterday. The media has been really paying a lot of attention to it, and now Mr. Media is paying attention. So it's perfect.
You need no other media than Mr. Media. That's
exactly.
what we tell people. Well, Rick, it is always a pleasure to see you, and anything we can do to help you with your projects, we're happy to do. And thanks for joining us today on Mr. Media.
Thanks, Bob. Nice to be here.
I'm not going out tonight.
Reaction Media is recorded live before a studio audience full of hashtag resistors with more good intentions than hours in the day in the new media capital of the world, St. Petersburg, Florida.
Hi, this is Rich Scheidner. And if you've ever wondered what it was like to be a stand-up comedian in the 1980s, I'm going to do you a big favor. Instead of billions of dollars for a time machine, you can just spend $24.95 and buy my new book, Kicking Through the Ashes, My Life as a Stand-Up in the 1980s Comedy Boom. It will save you money and give you thrills. It will take you there. Go to my website, richscheidner.com, go to amazon.com, and buy this book.